Good morning, I'm Tricia Bear from the Culinary Command Post, and today I'm going to show you how to make homemade French bread. So the first thing you do is you're going to get some active dry yeast, and this one's actually rapid rise instant yeast, and so we're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of that, and we're going to mix those up in our mixer. So I got 1.5 tablespoons of instant dry yeast. Two cups of warm water, because the warm water is what activates the yeast. So 2 cups of warm water. 2 cups of warm water, and then we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. This recipe honestly only takes about 5 ingredients to make homemade French bread. Okay, so then we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And 4.5 to 5 cups of flour. And we're going to start it on low, and we're just going to put most of the flour in there to begin with. It depends on the temperature and what your climate is there. So we're going to start with about almost 4 cups of flour. And I already sifted the flour. So anytime you're using flour or cocoa or powdered sugar, go ahead and sift it. And then today we're going to use the dough hook, which most mixers come with a dough hook, a paddle, and a whisk. But we're going to use the dough hook for the French bread. And you're going to start mixing it on low so it doesn't throw your flour everywhere. So start it on low. Okay, we're just mixed it enough just until it's combined. You want to remember to scrape down your sides of your bowls, because otherwise there'll be flour still on the sides of the bowl. So scrape the sides down, and then we're going to add our remaining flour, which is all-purpose flour. You can use all-purpose flour or even bread flour for this recipe. And I'm going to mix it in 3 increments, or three different stages. Okay, scrape down the sides and then put your last amount of flour. And you're going to mix it anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. It'll be tacky, but it won't stick to your fingers. So that's about 5 cups of flour. Okay, so we're going to mix it for another 7 minutes. Okay, so the dough's been mixing for about 7 minutes. And so now we're going to put the dough in a bowl with light oil on it. And we're going to let it set for an hour. Let me wash my hands. Okay, so I have a bowl here. We're going to lightly oil it. And we're going to put our bowl into the lightly greased mixing bowl and cover it with a towel and let it sit for an hour at room temperature, and it'll double in size. What you could do also is I'm going to put it on our baking mat and put a little flour in it and roll and knead it for just a minute. Make sure you flour your baking mat. I'm just going to knead it just for a couple minutes just to get it to where it's not too sticky. So basically all you're doing is taking it from the side and turning it over to the center. Just like that. You're just kind of kneading it. It's all you're doing. And then I've got this big scraper that I use to move it over to the bowl. So we're going to put a little bit of flour on it so it doesn't stick to it. Alright, and I'm just going to put it in the bowl that's already greased, lightly greased, and then we're going to let it sit for an hour. And that's just like so. And then we're going to cover it with a towel and let it sit for an hour. We're just going to let it proof for an hour. And while it's proofing, I'm going to go ahead and the recipe calls for 1 egg, 1 large egg. The eggs that I got that were large look little to me, so I'm going to add 2 eggs to this. And all I'm going to do is beat 2 eggs up. So whenever we get ready to put the bread in the oven, we're going to brush it with the eggs. That makes your dough shiny. Alright, so I have the eggs beaten, whatever. And then I have this French bread tray that I bought. And I've got a little sheet pan under it, so when I get ready to put it in the oven, it has little holes in it, which actually makes your crust crisp, and it actually cooks your crust better. And I believe it's a smaller version of the French bread. So we're going to make 2 or 3 rolls out of that one recipe after the dough has set for an hour. And then once we get the dough rolled up into like French bread form, we're going to go ahead and put it in the French bread tray, and then we're going to let it set another 30 minutes to 45 minutes to rise. So it takes a while to rise and proof, but as far as mixing it up, there was only 5 ingredients that it took to mix it in the stand mixer. Okay. Okay, so we let the dough sit for an hour so it can rise, or proof I should say, and now we're going to put it on the baking mat. Make sure you have flour on the baking mat. And I use this little bowl scraper to get it out easier. And I also, remember, I oiled the bowl so it'll be easier to get out, so it doesn't stick. See, I was able to get most of it out of the bowl. Okay, so I'm going to knead it just for a minute, and then I'm going to divide it in half so that I'll have 2 rolls of French bread, and that's what this recipe makes. Once I divide it in half and then roll it out, I'm going to place it in these French bread trays so they keep the same shape. And then I'm going to let it sit another 30 to 45 minutes. Sprinkle just a little on top. And I'm just kneading it just a couple more minutes. By it proofing, it actually doubled in size. And so now what we have to do is divide it up and shape it and then let it rest for 30 to 45 minutes. So all I'm doing is kneading it, and I'm pulling it from the sides, just like so. All right, I'm going to put a little flour underneath so it don't stick to my baking mat when I go to cut it in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to cut it in half. You can use a knife, or you can use this, is what I use. This big spatula. Try to cut it about the same on each. So I'm going to cut it in half. All right. So half of it will be one roll, and the other half will be the other French bread roll. Now I'm going to use my measured rolling pin, and I like the measured rolling pin because what it does, the end caps have different measurements on it. So whatever measurement you want as far as the thickness of your bread, that's what cap you want to use. And then once you roll it out, make sure you put flour on your rolling pin. I believe I got this off of Amazon. And then what we're going to do is just roll it back and forth into like a rectangular shape. Make sure you put enough flour on your rolling pin so it don't stick like that just did. So we're going to put more flour on it this time. Make sure your dough has a little flour, and then we're just going to roll it out into a rectangular square, and then we're going to roll it up, and that's what's going to be our French bread in the pan. When you're rolling it out, you should be able to pick it up and turn it. It's not sticking on your deal. It's starting to become a tangle. So once we get a rectangle shape, then we're going to roll the long end up. Just lost some. losing my end caps. Hang on a second. You just roll it back and forth until you get a rectangular shape. Like so. Then once you get a rectangular shape, you're going to roll it tightly. Just like so. And if you want, you can brush off that excess flour. Which I'm going to do. Okay, and then once I get it all rolled, I'm going to pinch together the seams where they come together so that it helps maintain the shape of the French bread. Okay, I pinched the seam together, and now I'm going to place it into the French bread mold here, and it also has holes in it so it makes your crust taste better. And then I placed it on a cookie sheet. Just make sure it's seam side down like that, and then you're going to squeeze it into that mold. What they need to do also, before you put it in the molds, you're going to spray it lightly. Spray the bottom lightly. No. I just used a paper towel to kind of spread it around to make sure it got everywhere when I sprayed it. Okay, we're going to move this one over to that side. I just kind of shape it a little bit with my hands. All right, that's the first one. Now we're going to do the second one. Again, we're going to roll it out. You might have to put flour on your rolling pin again. Now once I get the French bread rolled out into a rectangular shape, then I'm going to cut marks in the top of it. It helps it when it bakes, and it also looks really nice when you get it out. You can use a knife, or I think they also sell a blade just for that, for putting the slices in the bread on top. And this is just rolled out to about 1/4 inch thick. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm ready to roll it up very tightly. almost rolled up. I'm just brushing off the excess flour, and then I'm going to turn it over and then pinch together the seam that we just made. And the seam always goes on the bottom. And I've already sprayed the pan where this one's going to go. And you can use this spatula too to pick it up and make it easier so it doesn't lose its shape. Seams on bottom, and then you're just going to fit it into the French bread mold. Now once it rests another 30 to 45 minutes, then we're going to brush it with an egg on top of a whole egg, and that makes it shinier when it gets baked. Now while it's sitting there resting, I'm going to go ahead and score it with a knife or a scorer if you have it. And if you don't have a scorer, you can use a paring knife to do that as well. All right. Okay, so there's your 2 loaves of bread in the tray. Now we're just going to score it, and all you're trying to do is go diagonal on the bread like that, maybe a 1/4 inch deep. Just like that. Then once it rests for another 35-40 minutes, then we're going to brush it with the egg and then put it in the oven. And your temperature for that's going to be 375. Okay, so we've let our French bread rise for about 35 minutes. So now I've whisked up an egg, 2 eggs actually, and I'm going to put the egg wash on top. It makes your bread shiny. So you're going to spread it gently on the top. Make sure you get inside those crevices where you just cut the marks in the bread, scored it, so that way it is also shiny. Don't forget the sides of it, the sides that you can get to. And by having the holes or perforations in the bottom of the silicone baking tray. It makes your crust crispy but not burnt. And then of course you put it on top of a cookie sheet when you put it in the oven. Once it comes out of the oven, then we're going to put it on a tray to let it air, to let it cool. It's a wire tray where you can let the bread cool. You don't want to cut it while it's still hot. And we could have possibly made it into 3 different loaves just because this is a smaller French bread pan. So I think the next time I make this, I will put it in 3 sections. So I'll have 3 medium-sized French bread loaves. Because this one's hanging over the side just a little bit, so I'm pushing it back in. And this helps with your French bread not be curved like a snake. It's straight and uniform. I really like these rubber brushes for putting on egg whites or egg yolks or whole eggs, whichever, versus the one with the hairy brush ends. I don't like that because they fall out. Those are good for like basting barbecue sauce on things, but not for putting the egg on top of the bread. Okay, so I just barely lightly covered it in egg wash. I'm just kind of tucking it in a little bit so it don't overflow too much off the pan. I don't want it to get in the oven and overflow. All right. So we've got that, and then we're going to turn on our oven for 375 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it's going to bake anywhere from 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, so now I'm putting the French bread in the oven at 375 degrees, and you're going to cook it for about 35 to 40 minutes.